If you're watching this on YouTube and aren't subscribed, make sure and click the subscribe button, like, comment, let us know what you think about the episode. If there's a particular guest or topic that you like to have covered, we love to check your guys' feedback and then be able to get those suggestions on to future episodes. Today I'm going to be chatting with a longtime listener that has a really cool story. He has a Ford OBS truck that's been in his family since new, and he inherited it and decided to breathe some new life into it. So he's going to walk us through an engine swap that he did, also went through and did a different transmission, body work, upgraded the chassis, whole bunch of upgrades. So I'm looking forward to learning more about the truck, his build process, decisions, things he learned along the way. It's definitely going to be a great conversation. Before we get to it, wanted to give a shout out to one of our sponsors that helps make the Diesel podcast possible. Kershaw Knives has a 40% off MSRP code for you. If you go to kershaw.kaiusa.com, use code 40TDP2024. Gets you 40% off retail. They have a ton of different choices for EDC knives, ones for hunting, fishing, around the job site, around the house, and you can also pick from different blade steels, blade shapes, handle designs, different opening mechanisms, and their whole lineup's designed to meet really any budget that you might have. So if you're in the market looking for some cool gear, make sure and use code 40TDP2024 and get 40% off MSRP. All right, let's get to today's podcast with Matthew and learning more about this truck that's been in his family since new and some upgrades he's done to it. Matthew, welcome to the Diesel Podcast. I'm really excited to chat with you today. I appreciate you messaging us with the truck, the story behind it, the whole build process. So I look forward to getting into detail with it, learning more about the truck, yourself, the build. So welcome to the Diesel Podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate this. I was looking forward to this.
I wanted to kind of start at the beginning. You told me a little bit in the message, but tell me about the truck behind you, how you came to get it, and then we'll kind of go through the build and your decisions and the process of building it into what it is.
Sure. So my grandpa bought this truck new in 1995, which is the year I was born, actually. And it started out as a 5.8 351 Windsor with an E4OD auto, two-wheel drive. He owned a business where he used it as a work truck. And that's the only truck that I've ever seen my grandpa drive. It's right behind me. He took care of it. By the time I got it, though, it had some rust on it, which it was garage kept his entire life. But Central Illinois winters, pretty hard on metal because salt's rough around here. But, yeah.
Was it something like, did he keep it like completely stock the whole time, or did like when you were a kid, was it just bone stock, and then as it progresses to what we're going to chat about today, I know it's had a big transformation, but was it a stock truck its whole life?
Yeah. I mean, he changed the fluids, filters. He had a mechanic that did all that stuff on time. I mean, he maintained it very well. He had some, like, this truck was it was different than most. He had some big toolboxes on the side for his business that he had. So it wasn't like bone stock, but it was the old man special for sure. It looked like.
So when did you get it? And then when did the idea for the build start?
So my grandpa and I had talked about this before he had passed away, putting a diesel in it. Cause way back in the day, he was a truck driver. So he loved that I worked on diesel engines and stuff. I went to school for it. So I had always told him that someday we're going to put a diesel on that truck. And he was like, oh, there's no way you could do that. But, I got the truck in 2018. And I drove it as a daily for a while. I had another truck at the time, but, I just drove it as is. And it, like I said, it had some rust. It was a little rough just from age. So I drove it as a daily. But the day that I decided to start the build was the water pump went bad on the 351 Windsor. So I'm like, well, this is my excuse. Let's pull the engine out. That's kind of the turn of events was the water pump failure. So, which obviously, I didn't need to pull the engine out, but I told my wife that. So that was my excuse.
What did you always have a particular engine in mind that you wanted to put in that truck?
So I had thought about just like building that 351 because those are good gas engines. I mean, they're well known and all that. But by the time I would get heads, cam, intake, all that stuff, I could buy a decent Cummins engine. So I was like, that would be a pretty cool route. So I got on Facebook and started really researching it. The Cummins Facebook page, the Cummins Tech page, that helped me a ton. I've got a couple buddies in town that are pretty good with Cummins engines, and then at the time I was a diesel tech instructor at a college, so I taught the heavy diesel engine class. So I mean, I felt like it needed to happen, and I thought about a Power Stroke, and just because being a Ford, I thought that might be an easier swap. But after researching it didn't seem like putting a Power Stroke would be an easier swap. So started looking for Cummins. I had originally bought one from a guy. I had a VE pump on it, and my plan was to make this like a service truck, and because I used to work on stuff on the side. Now I do it full time, but make it 4-wheel drive, swap it, put a service bed on it, all that kind of stuff. So I thought the VE pump would be nice, reliable, get decent mileage and all that. Along the way somewhere, I decided that instead of going VE, I wanted to go P pump. So I had another buddy who had a 12-valve P pumped engine. It was already torn apart, but he sold me the engine and the pump for $800. So
wow.
That was a deal for sure. But at that point, I was like, I've got a P pump, so you can make power fairly easily with the P pumps. I mean, a decent amount. So started with wanted it to be a service truck, and now it ended with just a play truck. I mean, street strip. I kind of do it all with it.
with the engine itself, and it being torn apart, you got it. Did you have like a power number in mind that you wanted? And then if so, what kind of upgrades did you do to it when you put it back together?
So originally I thought if I could hit 400 horse to the wheels, that truck weighs 5,000 pounds of me in it. So it's a light truck, 2-wheel drive. So, it the way it is now, it doesn't hook it doesn't hook great on the street. But I assume I'm over 400 horsepower. I'm going to guess in the 500 range ish. But I've never dynoed it. I've called around. I'm not too far from Shy. It's in Effingham, Illinois. They don't have a chassis dyno anymore. So I'm hoping for a diesel event next year to take it to and get it dynoed. Looking forward to that for sure. So as far as mods to the engine, I had the engine down to the bare block. There's a good machine shop here in Decatur. They went through and resurfaced the cylinder head, resurfaced the machine surface on the block. The crankshaft, the reason that engine was apart when I got it was the crankshaft, the thrust washer had fallen out. So the crankshaft had a bunch of in-play. And the guy that had that engine before just wanted a crate engine put in this truck. So I got a good deal on it. Well, the crankshaft was grooved on the thrust surface, so I had to get I couldn't get that crankshaft resurfaced because it was too far gone. Got a new crankshaft from a local machine shop, and really started from there. None of the internals are like, this isn't built for 1,000 horsepower, 1,500 horsepower. Stock rods. I went with OEM bearings, new camshaft. I had originally got it's like a marine camshaft, so they're known to add, change the power curve a little bit. I had a buddy that was going to press the gear on it for me, and he pressed it on crooked, and it bent the camshaft. So ended up just getting a stock camshaft after that ordeal, which no big deal, stuff happens. So got a stock camshaft, OEM Cummins, and everything is new in the block, just OEM. I built the engine myself because that's kind of what I do. I really enjoy that kind of work. And at the time, I was teaching at a college for John Deere, and our boss had wanted one of us John Deere tech teachers to teach a general ag mechanics class. And I was like, I'll do it, whatever, that's fine. So thinking of my curriculum, I'm like, man, what should I do? And I was like, I've got it. I've got the perfect engine that is not a Deere. So I literally brought the bare block into the classroom. It was a 5-week class. And the first week of class, I brought in we got Snap-on roll carts that are full of, tools for each student. So I brought in a roll cart, and we had a test on what tools are, basically, showed them what basic hand tools are in this toolbox. And then the next week we started building this engine. So I I had been buying parts since I started this build. I just here and there bought parts, and so at this point in time, I had enough parts to get the build going. And it definitely, the students loved it. I mean, I loved it because I was at work building my own engine. And we would do the block, take a test over that. Do cylinder head work, take a test over that. Fuel system, take a test over that. And there was girls in this class, and they loved it. I mean, it was great. I got so many compliments on, man, that's such a cool class. Which I couldn't teach it like that again because I didn't have another block. I wasn't doing another project at the time, but that was definitely fun. And I got the block built there at school, so that was neat. Let's see. So once the block was built, I had bought my radiator already. The camshaft, I went with the OEM Cummins break-in procedure. So I set up a radiator on a table and kind of made a run stand for this engine because all of our stands at school were for Deere engines. So I kind of fit this to fit on a Deere stand and broke in the engine at school with all the students there. And that was just, they really enjoyed it. And so did I.
That's cool.
Yep, for sure.
With there's so many parts of this build to go into. I think the engine is kind of at the heart of it. It's like there's a lot of people I talk to where they love that OBS Ford body style. It's just it's classic to them, or they have a personal connection to it, and then they want to put a 12 valve. They want to have like that simplicity of that 12 valve in that classic body style truck, and there's so many things that bolt to it from there. You got the transmission. Like, did you stick with the E4OD that was in it?
No. So I went with, so originally I got on, find all these deals on Marketplace. I found a ZF5 that had an adapter for a 4BT because it was in like a bread truck or something. So I had the small adapter plate. And originally, way back in my original thoughts, I thought this was going to be a service truck, so I wasn't going to beat on it like I do, now. So I thought this smaller bell housing, smaller adapter plate, smaller clutch would be okay for what I was going to use it for. Once I got the P-pumped engine, decided to make some power, went with an NV4500 that a buddy of mine is like die-hard NV4500s. They build them. They're like the local shop that builds them around here. So he got me a deal on a transmission he'd already gone through, did the fifth gear nut, lock washer, all that stuff, or fifth gear lock washer. And he got me a South Bend single disc clutch because I wasn't sure what kind of power I would make, and being two-wheel drive and not that heavy, I thought I could go with a single disc, like the racing, I forgot the part number, but South Bend has a racing single disc. Found out last week that it just wasn't going to be good enough because I burned it up. So going dual disc, got it ordered, gotta get it here very soon. But yeah, so NV4500, it has held up. I've got 5,000 miles on the truck since I built it. Took 5 years to build. Just got it done this spring, but I've got 5,000 miles on it. That's the worst thing that's happened is that clutch, which that was my own stupidity. I was trying to do a third gear launch, and not a good idea. But that's all. That's all part of it, boys.
What'd you do with the pump and the turbo?
So the pump, one of the other teachers when I was teaching for Deere, his name's Russ. He is like the fuel system man. Like any electronic or mechanical diesel fuel system, this dude, he knows like the back of his hand. So I had the pump in there. Well, I had the block the block in there, and we went through it and we did basically all the mods you can do without pulling the camshaft out of the pump and all that stuff. But 4K governor springs, the rack plug. I wasn't going to go full cut delivery valves, but I got them from a buddy for cheap, so I put full cuts in it. What else? The AFC modified that a little bit, which I mean it's smoky, but not. If you're driving through town, it's not smoky, but if you get on it, it does. It smokes more than you'd like, but the fuel plate, I had a custom ground fuel plate, and I didn't love the responsiveness, so I just took it out. And the truck actually, it is way more responsive, runs better, and it, believe it or not, it does not smoke as bad without that fuel plate. So it's set up pretty good. It runs perfect.
How'd you couple that with the turbos? Are running the stock one still, or did you go with an
Oh,
upgraded one?
yeah. So the turbo at the time, so like I said, I bought these parts. It took 5 years of saving up and buying these parts. Smeding Diesel popped up on my Facebook, and they run or one of the social media platforms. They're running a deal on this S362 for like $800. And I was like, oh well, that's a good deal. So bought that, and it may be a little small for what I'm doing, but it was a good deal. It spools fast. I do recommend that. That's a good turbo. The S362 has held up well, which, like I said, 4,000 miles on it. So it's broken in, that's for sure, but it's held up well.
Did you run into any issues with adapting this engine into the Ford body, or with the electronics, or with anything in the space in the engine compartment? Were there any challenges you had with the swap?
So I was worried about, because if you look on the forum or the Cummins forum on Facebook, they say that the rear valve cover will hit the top of the firewall. So I was worried about that, but I guess I went with -3 degrees of angle on the engine block and transmission, and that was just enough where I can get that rear valve cover off. So clearance-wise, it was pretty good. The mounts I went with were the diesel conversion specialist mounts. So I didn't have to like custom make a bunch of things. The only thing I really custom made was the transmission cross bracket. I used the Ford one, but I had to modify it to fit the NV 4500. So, I mean, as far as someone else doing this, I mean, you don't have to go to this extreme to like do a frame off restoration, but it's not like the most complex thing in the world. Like anybody that wants to do this could definitely do it.
You had mentioned the frame off, and I love this part of it because I love to see. It's just so cool when you see an older truck and like the frame and everything is just, it looks new. It's just, I don't know, something about it always grabs me. So what did you do with the chassis and the body work and everything else that I see in the picture or see in the video behind us now?
So whenever I first pulled the engine out, that original gas engine, I was like, I'm just gonna throw this Cummins in there, throw a service bed on it, make my service truck. Well, I had the rusty bed off of it, so it was pretty rusty, the original bed, and I had the engine out of it. And I'm like, man, it's like 4 more bolts I could have the cab off. So went with, pulled the cab off, and that's kind of a funny story. At the time, I didn't have a lift in my shop, so I had 8 students come home with me, and we picked the cab up by hand, and right, it was hilarious. But yeah, that was a good decision for sure, because once I had it down to the frame, then I'm like, well, might as well do every suspension part there is. So I did ball joints, tie rods. It had the original springs in it for the gas engine. So I used 7.3 springs, which raised the truck up a little bit, but it still kind of has a rake to it. And I lowered the rear end of it 2 inches. It still has a rake, but that Cummins is really heavy. So, all that suspension stuff, like I said, 2-inch lower on the rear. Basically every bushing and bearing on that, new brakes, brake lines, all of that stuff is all new. When I had it down to the frame, I got a sandblaster and blasted it. I was going to get it powder coated, but I had a few buddies tell me that powder coat on frames chips easier. So I just used POR paint and got a spray gun, and I mean, it turned out really good. It's no SEMA truck. I mean, it's not perfect, but it turned out really good. I'm super happy with how the frame and everything turned out.
With the bed, looks like you put a new bed on and some new fenders and things like that.
Yep. So, the black and red is not a forever paint job, but so I found the bed on Facebook for $800. I mean, I called around to like salvage yards and stuff, and nobody ever has a rust-free OBS bed. There's a place in Indiana, I believe, that sells rust-free beds. I was going to go through them, but I found this on Facebook for like $800. A guy bought a truck new and put a flatbed on it back in the 90s, and this bed just sat inside. So like, this bed is in really good shape. Couple dings and stuff, but zero rust. Like underneath, that bed looks brand new. So those Facebook Marketplace finds are pretty good. Fenders, I had a student that was a big OBS Ford guy as well, and he had bought fenders for his truck, but he ended up going a different route. So I got the fenders for, I forgot what I paid, but a good deal on the fenders as well. but the hood and the door and the cab is all original. I buffed it out and it turned out pretty good. No rust on the cab at all. Underneath looks new with that cab, so that's held up well. But I mean, as everybody knows, the OBS trucks, it's like the fenders and the beds they don't hold up.
With the paint, are you going to keep it the same red color when you redo it, or are you going to change it all up? Or
so I do plan on. Well, I originally wanted to paint it just the Ford red color, but I may do a vinyl wrap like with my business logo or something like that. But I mean, paint's probably a better route, but a wrap would be a way to get it done quick because I don't want it to sit. I mean, I built this truck, so I drive it all the time, so I don't want it to sit in the shop for 2 months or whatever. So wrap is probably a faster route to go. But yeah, I drive this truck. I mean, not daily, but often. Like I built it to drive, and it's reliable. Like the interior is, I mean, it looks bone stock. When people get in the truck, they're like, "Wow, this looks like brand new." But my grandpa took good care of the inside. The only thing that's not OEM would be the boost gauge and the gauges, but you gotta have those for sure. The dash, everything works, but the tack, I haven't got the tack to work yet because it was a gas engine, so I couldn't quite figure that out. But I mean, it's never done. The build's never done. So this winter, I'll definitely go through and do some other things. But as far as the interior, it looks OEM inside.
do you think you'll do a 4-wheel drive swap on it?
I bought, years ago, I had bought axles from a Super Duty Excursion, and I had planned on doing that. But I actually, the original NV 4500 that I bought a transfer case with that as well. Like that was my original plan. But then I was like, man, I just want to get this truck done. So the 2-wheel drive thing, and honestly, I'll never take this truck like off-roading or anything. We don't get that much snow in Central Illinois anymore. So I won't drive it in the snow. So I don't need 4-wheel drive unless it was going to be like a purpose-built race truck, which I've contemplated that, but I don't want to truck up because of, the history of it. I can't do that to this truck, but it'll probably stay 2-wheel drive.
Common question we get from you guys a lot is, hey, I need a diesel engine. I either, I can't wait this long to get one, or normal place I get stuff from it just takes too long, or they don't have the parts in it that I need. Maybe my truck's not stock, or I tow heavy with it. I don't want to go back with just a stock engine. DFC Diesel is a sponsor of the podcast. We worked with them, hand in hand on doing episodes, answering technical questions. They have a complete lineup of Cummins, Duramax, and Power Stroke remanufactured engines that are set to a standard of ISO 9001 2015 standards, which is a huge deal in the aftermarket. And there's certain levels of quality testing, validation that are required for that. So when you get one of those engines, the type of quality that's built behind it with an industry-leading warranty that's really comprehensive. And the other thing with that is sometimes the options that are out there, it's a basic OEM engine. You want a little bit more. You don't want to have the same failure again. So there's a bunch of different series of engines that they have, from core, street, tow haul, and also the Speed of Air series, which we've covered on the podcast before. There's a lot of really cool benefits to it. And if you have questions about that, reach out to them. If you don't know the type of engine that you're looking for, if you go to dfcdiesel.com, there's a ton of info there. You can send an email or you can reach out to them. Also, they're working with Speed of Air pistons, which it's the only piston that pays for itself. And there's a lot of really cool technology behind it. So you can add that into your build and be able to get better fuel economy, increase power, increase torque, and better engine life out of it. Some of the most common engine applications or series of engines that they have with that lead time, a lot of them are in stock or they have really short lead times. So you can check your favorite retailer or go to dfcdiesel.com, check them out, see what's in stock, see what you can get. If you have questions, maybe you want to do something that's outside of the normal series of engines, they have tons of choices for rods, cranks, pistons, valve train upgrades, tons of different things. So if you're in the market, definitely make sure and head on over and check them out. Now, I think when it comes to a build like this, there's so many different directions you can go with it, right? With power, with the body, the chassis, tons of different things. Would there be any things that you would change that you did, like maybe going back and maybe having a different build plan for it, or maybe have done something different mechanically? Are there any, I don't want to say regrets because you can change them, or it took the build in a different direction, but would there be anything you'd change about it?
Um, the manual transmission thing, I went with the manual because I thought that it would be cheap and easy. But by the time I got a built NV 4500, a South Bend clutch, the adapters, and all that, it was no cheaper than a good automatic. So I do kind of wish I would have went automatic, full manual valve body, which it's not too late. I could always switch it up. But that's one thing. Something else is I this spring I wanted to just get this truck on the road. So I just threw a fuel cell in the bed. So, I mean, I'll end up putting a fuel tank under the bed eventually. So that's something else. The battery right now is in the bed, which, I mean, it looks clean. It's mounted nicely, but I want the battery hidden underneath underneath the cab, probably along the frame rails there.
If somebody was going to tackle something like this, what would you tell them what would be some tips that you would tell them to do to either make the build go smoother, maybe save a little bit of money? Maybe it has to do with sourcing parts. Maybe it's the power level. Maybe it's just even how to do it, how to tackle it. What would you suggest somebody does?
I would say, I mean, one thing that I was kind of glad that I did was just kind of bought parts here and there. I started doing like side work to pay for this truck, which now the side work is my full-time career. So the diesel industry is definitely a lifestyle. You get into it and you love it, which I've made it a career. But, I started doing side work, working on, equipment just to pay for this truck. And I had a shop completely full of brand new parts in the box. And when I was ready to put the build together, I just would pull parts off the shelves that I bought previously. So that's, I mean, unless you've got crazy money, buying one piece, if you get, every time you get paid, buy a part here and there, and then eventually you'll have a good portion of your parts. I'm glad that I went that route. I do wish that I wouldn't have spent, or I do wish it wouldn't have taken me 5 years to do this, but I've got 3 kids and full-time job and own a business. So, life gets in the way, but it don't give up either. That's something else. Like there were so many times where I'm like, man, I've got all these parts in the shop, a nice painted frame with an engine and a transmission sitting in it. Don't give up. That you can do it. Like anybody, you don't have to be a diesel mechanic. I mean, YouTube, Google, forums, they all help for sure. This podcast, I mean, this has been a huge help for me. Just listening to other guys' builds and see what they do. I really enjoy doing that, and just you don't give up for sure. I mean, there was a point where like my family and stuff were like, "You're gonna get that truck done," and I was like, it was this last Christmas. My grandma, which the one who gave me the truck after my grandpa passed away, she was like, "Are you ever gonna get that truck done?" And my wife and I left, and I was like, you know what? I'm going home. I'm gonna go work on that truck. So it may take some motivation, but even if you've got kids, family, job, all that stuff, you can make time. This spring, I would spend like after we put the kids to bed, I would go out in the shop till 2 a.m. working on this thing just to get it done because I wanted it done that bad. So if you want it, you can do it for sure.
What's so cool about these kind of builds is you can make the exact truck that you want. You're not stuck with either what it came with direct from Ford or Ram or GM or whatever year it might be. You can make it into your own. And I know one of the things that's like at the focal point of being a diesel enthusiast is there's like this independent spirit. And I think that's one of the reasons, we drive diesel trucks because they're not the majority of vehicles on the road. We like being a little different. We like the benefits of it. And that also translates over into the builds. So it's really cool to see something that has like a personal story behind it, it being your grandfather's truck, and then how you were able to create something that you love to drive and be able to make these decisions with the pump, the engine, where you put the battery, where you put the fuel cell, what kind of transmission you ran, what kind of clutch is in it, even going down to, coating the frame and doing you made it exactly how you wanted it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that is true. It took a lot of time, but it is exactly. I mean, I will eventually finish the paint, or like I said, get it wrapped or whatever. But it is funny, like everybody I see is like, "Man, I love what you did with the paint." I'm like, You do? It's black and but I mean, it gets a lot of attention, and I've got my business logo on the side, so it does get a lot of attention. And it's loud and obnoxious. So as far as that goes, it's fun. I love driving it. Like, I have no regrets. And in the big picture, I have no regrets of this build. This has been one of the best things I've ever done. Like every morning, my son gets up. He's like, "Dad, you gonna take me to school and pop a house truck?" So my son loves it. He's 6, and it'll be his truck someday, and he can. By then, they'll probably want to put like a Tesla swap in it or something. Hopefully not. Things will be different, but he'll get it someday. He can do what he wants with it. But this is it, and we really enjoy it.
Something I was curious about when you were talking about teaching and having the students like help you with the engine and stuff. Do you think like did that experience maybe inspire one of them or get them to think about diesel a little bit different than just like equipment or over the road type of diesel applications and think about it in an automotive sense?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I had students that had diesel trucks and stuff, and every time they do something to it, they'd be like, "Hey, Matt, come ride my truck." And that was always fun. I mean, we were pretty close. I saw my students for 6-7 hours a day every day, so we got pretty close. And yeah, it inspired them to do their own builds. And there were some guys that had brand new diesels, and they would do some things to tune them up, and guys with older diesels and all that stuff. And you know what though, it really inspired me to see how they reacted to it. I mean, and they would always say, "You're gonna get that truck done and drive it." I told like 3 different groups that I would drive that truck to graduation. I did not, but I had resigned this last year to do my own business. But I did drive it to the last graduation. So that made it all worth it right there, because they all wanted to see it, and they all kind of had a part in it, as far as injectors, I didn't talk about that. I've got 5x12 nozzles, and during our fuel systems class, we had the students rebuild those injectors. So, I've got pictures of students working on parts of this truck, and it does always, I like to look at those pictures and reminisce for sure. And they loved it, and it definitely inspired me for sure.
It's what's so cool about the older trucks, which it's unfortunate in some ways that today a lot of people can't experience it unless they have one of these older trucks. But like back in the day when the UPS guy or FedEx guy'd show up, and you'd have like 5 or 6 or 8 huge boxes of parts show up, like exhaust and pump stuff and turbo stuff, and you could completely transform that truck in a weekend to where, maybe it had 300 horsepower, and when you were done with it, it was 650, and it sounded better. And it was just like, that's my only experience with it. I have never done a restoration or a build like this, but I remember how exciting it was and just inspiring, and how like friends would see it and then they'd want to do it, or I would be at their house on the weekend helping them, and I'd be like, "You completely transformed this truck with all this. I need to do it." And then now I'm spending money and I'm doing this stuff. And that was one of the really cool things that I remember of kind of the early days of diesel and doing it. And it's why, like, even now I look back towards the older ones more than I do newer trucks. The newer ones, you got a newer Ram sitting behind you right there, so you know better than I do. But like, there's a lot of creature comforts, a lot of technology that's in them. Like going on a longer road trip, I'd probably want to take a newer truck. But like, there's so many options with performance and builds and different things that you can do with these older ones. I don't know. They got a special place in my heart.
Oh, I agree for sure. I mean, the new trucks, like my service truck, is a 6.7 Cummins. Love it. Absolutely love that truck. It runs great, and stock power. I mean, it's got plenty of power. I've got a service bed on it, and it's 12,000 pounds across the scale. It does great, pulling trailers and everything, but it's just not the same as the old Cummins.
Have you ever thought of doing another build, but maybe something dedicated to just racing or big power?
I think about that all the time. So I'm going to start another build. I want to do like a 4-door quad cab long bed dually OBS, and do like a common rail full manual valve body, 700-800 horsepower ish. I think that'd be a lot of fun, because it'd be nice to have a 4-door, because I've got 3 kids, so we can't family cruise this truck, but if I had a 4-door, that would be a fun toy as well. That'd be pretty fun.
Is there what is it about the OBS body style that makes you want to do another build like that?
Well, just the fact that this one's been in the family forever, and I know them like inside now. Like I've got an LMC magazine I ordered a bunch of parts out of, and I've touched every bolt on this truck. So if I got a different one, I would pretty well know what bolt goes where, and what to do to make it mine.
It's very cool. I know there's a huge following of OBS fans, and it's been, you've probably seen this as well, like being involved in diesel as much as you are, is how they're like, it almost seems like a resurgence of, I don't know what it is, but it's just like all of a sudden the last few years I've been seeing a ton of Ford OBS, whether guys are building the 7.3s in them, whether they're doing Cummins swaps. It just seems like that body style has become more and more popular, that I see them in builds and I see them in things like we're talking about today. Have you seen that as well? And if so, what do you think is driving that?
I think, well, I mean, for sure, new trucks with the emissions on. I mean, people want to go back to older trucks. But yeah, you're right, for sure. There is a huge following for the OBSs. I'm glad there is, because I'm on some Facebook pages, and I've learned a lot of information by other guys that have done trial and error. So I'm glad that other people like these trucks as much as I do, because I mean, there's all sorts of information out there, and a bunch of people willing to help. These old trucks are, I mean, we want them to stay on the road forever. So I think everybody's in the same boat. We want to help each other out and make sure that we can keep them going.
Yeah, well, and the aftermarket for him has continued to grow. I know there's companies out there that are specializing in making parts, whether it's for the body, door handles, hinges, just things that you can't get anywhere else unless you go to a salvage yard or something like that. But they're making new quality parts to be able to keep these things operating and on the road. So that's been really cool to see the aftermarket side of it.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, for sure. There's a few companies out there you've had on the podcast even, and they sell quality parts, and I mean, people love these trucks and definitely want the quality items you get from these good companies. I mean, Amazon parts probably aren't always the best idea. It's sometimes, most of the time, better just spend the money and get good quality stuff that's made for that truck the first time, and don't do it twice.
Would you say, you mentioned like Facebook Marketplace a few times, would you say that was a key part of your build, was just being patient with finding the right parts and the right things that you wanted versus maybe finding it faster and easier, but spending a lot more money?
Yeah. Patience was a virtue here for sure. I mean, if I had $100,000 in the bank just to spend on a truck, like, it'd be easy. I'd buy everything new, but budget friendly for sure. Marketplace was awesome. I mean, honestly, I met some people, just other Cummins guys selling like parts for these trucks through Marketplace. The guy that I bought the original ZF5 from, he had that in a Ford F350, and he was like disassembling it to take it apart to sell all the Cummins parts. And I was like, "What are you doing with the mounts?" And he's like, "I've still got them." So I bought the mounts from that guy as well. They're diesel conversion mounts, but so just get to talking to people. The community is huge, like bigger than you think for sure with these old trucks. And yeah, Facebook is, I mean, just the forums, Marketplace, all that stuff helps out a lot. Gets you in different groups to meet different people that love these trucks. So yeah, that's been a big part of it, I think.
I wanted to ask you about that a little bit, because I don't think I've ever asked anyone that's done a build like this question. Were there any tips you would give somebody when they're looking at some place like Facebook Marketplace, and say you find the part you're looking for and there's 5 listings? Would there be certain questions or things you would ask to make sure, well, is this part as new or as good as I think it is, or anything to be, I guess, to make sure you're getting a good quality used part?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't know what you're looking for, that would be tough. But if you kind of know specifically exactly what you want, I mean, just looking at the condition of, and how they take the pictures in the dark, like if it's 5 hours away, it may not be worth going to even look at. But if it's a nice picture, good quality, the guy responds and sounds knowledgeable, I would say most of the time that's worth driving to look at, for sure. I mean, I always look at people's Facebook before I even message them, just to make sure it seems like legit too. Because and never buy something on Facebook and pay with Apple Pay or whatever if you don't have the product. I've had buddies get burned doing that, which that just seems sketchy. So, just make sure it's legit first, and always look at the part before you get it. And as far as questions to ask them, I mean, it just depends on what it is. Like if it's a transmission or something, miles or how it was treated or whatever. But people aren't always honest either, so that kind of throws a wrench in it.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of risk in it. But I guess even maybe planning for, maybe the guy says, "Hey, I've got 100,000 miles on this transmission. It ran when I took it out." Well, if it doesn't, kind of maybe having an idea of what it might cost to go through that NV 4500, or what a clutch is going to cost, or what new hydraulics are going to cost, or something like that, could probably help as well when setting up a budget for a build like this.
Yeah, a budget is. I had a budget in the first place, and I'm very thankful my wife let me do this, because we could have went to Disney like 5 times what I spent on this truck. But I promised her that once this truck was done, we'd go to Disney. So that's coming up here soon. Yeah, definitely get a budget, and then whenever you get that budget number, double that, and that's probably where you'll be.
Very cool. Do you now on social media? Do you have like a build page or like an Instagram or anything like that where you've cataloged this build, or if you start another one where you want to show the kind of step by step, or have you thought about doing that?
I honestly don't. Like, I've got my personal Facebook. I post some pictures of it and stuff every now and then. I put some, the story behind it's on my Facebook. But I don't do a ton of social media, just I'm so busy all the time. My best friend, he's got a YouTube channel that he's got some stuff documented. He's got 3 different videos. Well, 2, and then will be 3. He's working on the 3rd one, but it's Rev Too Late Racing. He's got a twin turbo Camaro that runs. It's crazy fast. But there's a few videos of us doing the build on this truck, and it's pretty neat. So as far as seeing how the truck started versus now, the Rev Too Late Racing channel on YouTube would be a good one. Or, I mean, you can message me. I'm happy to post pictures on Facebook, or I've got a TikTok, but I don't really post anything on it. But I would. I mean, if people wanted to see more of this truck, I'd be happy to share pictures and stories, whatever.
Yeah, I think people will, especially with this build. And then if you do that 4-door dually with the common rail swap and everything else, people are going to want to see it. It helps give them ideas, and then it can be kind of tough to find somebody to ask questions to, somebody that feels like approachable. That it's not like you're calling a company and asking questions and they want to sell you something. You can ask somebody who's already been there, done that, and give you some tips and save you some steps. So yeah, I think if you do something like that, people definitely tune in, check it out, and see what you're working on.
Yeah, okay. Well, then I'll definitely keep that in mind. Which, like, I posted on a Facebook page the other day asking, like, it's 2-wheel drive stick shift, asking what like fast ETs are, and people are just roasting me like, you can't have a 2-wheel drive stick. I'm like, I understand that, but I'm just saying what's a fast number in the 8. I ran a 1040. That was my fastest pass last time I took it, but I'm not getting traction all that well. So I'm spinning, and I mean, my overall goal is to get down in the 8s. I mean, I think that'd be pretty awesome. I mean, that hopefully by next year I could do something to get down in the 8s.
There are some, I can't remember. If I think about it, I'll send you a message, but there is a place that has the fastest, like, quarter mile. I don't know about 1/8 mile. They probably do, with manual trucks. I wish I could remember off the top of my head, but there is a place that does list it. So when I think of it, or if I find it, I'll send it over to you.
Sure. Sounds good.
Yeah, that'll be cool. Well, I appreciate you reaching out to us. And like I said, it's a really cool build. It definitely got my interest. I love the truck. I love the story behind it. It's really cool to see how you did, like how you built it yourself, or, even with the help some students in class putting some things together, create a really good teaching moment. So keep me updated, in the future, if you change up the truck, or whenever you do start that other build. I'll be curious to follow along. I appreciate you listening to the podcast and then sharing the build with us and our listeners.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it, and I really love the podcast. A lot of your other guests they're awesome. There's been a lot of good info on this podcast. I hope I didn't bore everybody, but I mean, something to talk about. Just a normal guy building a normal truck, or I guess not so normal, but just anybody can do it. That's kind of why I wanted to come on here. Just if you don't have to, be a diesel mechanic. You don't have to own a shop. I mean, which I guess I'm both, but you don't have to. Like, anybody can do this stuff. And if there's anybody that has any questions, I'd be happy to help. So yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me on.
It's great chatting with you. I appreciate the time, and look forward to seeing what you do with this truck and maybe another one in the future. So thanks again.
Yeah, thank you.
Don't forget, diesel fans, make sure and head on over to kershaw.kaiusa.com and use code 40 TDP 2024. Get you 40% off MSRP. It's a great way to save some money, get some cool gear. If you're in the market for an EDC knife, one for hunting, fishing, around the job site, around the house, they got you covered with a whole bunch of different choices for blade steel, blade shape, different handle designs, and opening mechanisms. And the whole lineup's designed to meet really any budget that you might have. We appreciate them offering that discount code just for you guys. So if you're looking for a new knife, want some cool gear, and save some money along the way, use code 40 TDP 2024. I also want to give a shout out to some of our Patreon supporters: Tyler Loewen at 23 Diesel, CUTTERUP Rob, J Cole, all of our other Patreon supporters, all of you who subscribe on YouTube and podcast apps, follow us on social media. We appreciate all your support here in year 8 of the Diesel Podcast, and look forward to bringing you guys more of the content that you want to hear in 2024. Till next time, keep the shiny side up.